Today we're at Inglis Falls, a conservation area tucked away just outside of Owen Sound, Ontario. I've never been here before, so we're going to take some time to explore and get some images of the waterfall. The main goal today is to do some time-lapse and long exposure photography. Alright, so I found a spot to set up here, which is the best view I can find at the moment. For equipment, I'm using the Sony A7IV with the Sony 16-35 f4 power zoom lens. I have a 1 to 5 stop variable ND and circular polarizer by K&F Filters. I'm using the Manfrotto B3 tripod. I'm going to set up my camera now and we'll try to get some nice long exposure shots.
I wanted to create real depth, so I layered the scene, branches up front, the waterfall in the middle, and the rocks in the back. The water flows on a diagonal, which naturally draws your eye through the shot. I love how the soft, smooth water contrasts with the hard, rugged rock, and how the lush greens of the summer balance with the earthy tones of the stone. Shutter speed will shape the mood. Fast speeds freeze the droplets and bring out the water textures, while slow speeds, a half a second to 2 seconds, will blur the flow into that soft, dreamy look we love for waterfall shots. This ended up being the best shot of the day. It was taken at ISO 50, aperture at f11, and shutter speed at half a second.
So I'm setting up a time lapse here. I'm going to be doing 240 exposures. Right now I have my shutter speed at half a second, and I will be doing intervals of 2 seconds. I already set my manual focus and manual white balance at 5500. There is a lot of spray coming off the waterfall right now, so I hope it won't affect the time lapse too much. Let's see how it turns out. So the reason that I have everything set in manual mode for the time lapse is to avoid any flickering during the time lapse. It will keep the camera from trying to readjust the focus or the white balance halfway through your time lapse and creating a flicker effect. This ensures that all exposures are the same, and then in post, because I'm shooting in RAW, it gives me the option to change the white balance if I need to. So that's it for my adventure to Inglis Falls today for some landscape photography. Once I get home, I'm going to jump into Lightroom and show you how I edit some of the shots that I got from today. I'm back from Inglis Falls and opening Lightroom. We're going to edit one of the best photos that I got from today. So first, I'm going to open lens corrections and enable profile corrections and remove chromatic aberration. This will get rid of any vignetting and give us a nice even exposure to start with. Next, I'm going to crop the image. I'm going to go for a 16:9. And if you hold Option, you can maintain this aspect ratio as you crop in. And I'm just going to play around until I'm happy with how it looks. I want to keep some of this foreground in, but I don't want any of the sky. Before I change any of the other sliders, I want to make sure I got a nice perfect white balance. So you can use the dropper here and select a white point. As you can see, it went to 5050, but you can play around with this until you're happy. I believe that around 5100 here, I have nice white water, and I'll change the tint just a little bit. I basically want to get the water as white as possible and get rid of any blue. And keep in mind that this will depend on your photo. The settings won't necessarily be identical to mine. I underexposed this photo in camera to preserve the highlights. So I'm going to raise the shadows up all the way, and this will bring back all the detail, especially in the foreground and in the trees. I shot this in RAW, so it will give me a lot of flexibility.
Next, I'm going to bring down the highlights to about -60. And you'll notice that it will mainly just affect the waterfall itself, bringing back a lot of that detail and just more balance to the overall photo. Before adjusting the exposure slider, I'm going to bring up the whites to about +30 here, and that will bring more white out of the waterfall and just brighten it up a little bit. I'm going to bring down the blacks just slightly to about -15, and that will affect the darkest parts of the image and just add a little bit more contrast. Okay, next I'm going to raise the exposure to about +45, being mindful that I'm not blowing out any of my highlights. And I'll increase the contrast to about +15. And scrolling down to the tone curve to bring in a little bit more contrast in the image, I'm going to just bring up the highlights to about +10, the lights to +5. I'm going to bring down the darks to about -5 and the shadows to about -10. And you see it just added a little bit more contrast to the image. This is where we are so far. This is before and this is after. If you want to see what changes you've made in this specific tab, you can just toggle this on and off and you can see the difference. So this is before and this is after with these very minor adjustments. Closing the tone curve tab and going back up to the basic, I'm going to just add a little bit of dehaze, about +5. It was very misty, so this will cut through that a little bit. And the clarity I'll just boost up also to +5. Okay, I'm done with the basic tab for now. I'm going to go down to the color mixer tab. And to further reduce the blues in the water, I'm going to desaturate it. So you can play with these to see what colors are the most prominent in your photo. I'm going to take down the blues to about -30 in saturation. And also the yellows, if you look up here, you have some of this yellow in the water. I'm going to bring it down as well to about -20. You do have some yellow-green in the trees, and I do want to retain some of that. And I'm actually going to boost up the saturation of the green just to about +10. So if we toggle this on and off, you can see a big change in the water and just a slight change in the trees. Just to demonstrate the color grading tab and add a little bit of balance to the greens and the shadows, I'm just going to add slight blue to the highlights. So I'll just move this to 235, hold shift, and just increase the saturation just slightly to 15. Just to finish up the color, I'm going to go back to the basic tab and scroll down to Vibrance and Saturation. And I'm just going to increase these as well to about +5 each. And next I'm going to go down to the Detail tab. And I want to add a little sharpening, but I don't want it to affect the waterfall. So what I'll do, on Mac I'll hold Option, and I'll mask out the waterfall until the trees and the edges of the rocks are what's going to be affected. And I'll scroll in and just increase the amount of sharpening. I don't want to increase it too much because I don't want to introduce too much noise to the image. Go about +70 here. And lastly, I'm just going to add a few masks. The first mask is going to be a linear gradient, and I'll just pull from the bottom up. And I want to just decrease the exposure just slightly to draw the eyes towards the waterfall. And for the second mask, I'm going to go select subject. And if it doesn't select your waterfall or subject perfectly, you can brush in the areas that it missed or subtract the areas that you want to be removed. And I'm going to scroll down to the texture just to emphasize that dreamy look or smooth look of the waterfall. I want to just decrease the texture slightly. See, this would be all the way. I want want to just go about -20 here. That wraps up today's waterfall adventure and editing process. I hope this workflow gives you some fresh ideas. If you found it helpful, tap subscribe and the bell to join me for future explorations.